Welcome to my channel, Atieno Ogola the lawyer, Karibuni Sana. And today I'm joined with one of my good friends, yes, Nimzito. He's called Jack Okore. He's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. And today we are going to be talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. It's a recent agreement that has come into force, and it's to improve the trade of various goods in Africa and to integrate trade in African countries. If you like the video, share and subscribe. So thank you so much, Jack, for finding time.
Yeah.
I know you're a very busy man these
Not
days.
really.
But thank you for finding time. And maybe before we start the conversation, you could introduce yourself to my viewers.
Okay, thank you, Atieno. My name is, as she has said, Okore, Jack Jayalo. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I do general practice with the firm of Professor Tomujenda and Associates. At present, I took some sabbatical, and I'm studying issues to do with the subject matter of this conversation, trade and investment. So currently, I'm a student. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so maybe you could start by explaining to the viewers what is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement all about?
Okay, so the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is an agreement that was signed by the African states, by the AU body, basically to try and liberalize or rather ease trade in Africa. So discussions around it started in 2012. There was a need by the African states to actually come up with an agreement that would help to realize the economies in Africa in terms of having economies of scale. And maybe to put it in context, when you look at the share of Africa in the world trade, now the world trade, I'll refer to it as a cake, yeah? And so we're having various players in the world trade. We're having big players such as the US. We're having the likes of China, which have almost a population of 1 billion. That is a market of 1 billion people. Having the likes of India, which have big markets, and as such, they have a big percentage in the share of the world trade. And so you are comparing it with African states, some of which have, let's say, a population of 2 million, call it Namibia, Gambia, a population of 2 million, you know, trying to fight for this cake with the likes of China, which have a population of almost 1 billion. So there was thought around having Africa as one economic market so that we can fight for this world trade cake as a single entity. And so in 2012, the heads of states in Africa mooted this idea. In 2015, we started negotiations in trying to come up with an agreement that would give us seamless flow in terms of trade in Africa. And in 2019, these negotiations came into fruition when we had the African Continental Free Trade Area. And in one of its provisions, it provided that upon the depositing of 22 instruments of ratification, then it will come into force. So this happened on the 30th of May in 2019. And so we had the African Continental Free Trade Area coming into force then.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, that is the history maybe with regard to this agreement in Africa. Yeah.
Okay, and I think you've answered actually the next question, which was to ask what does it seek to achieve. You said, of course, it's the harmonization of trade in Africa and enabling African countries to be able to compete favorably with other large markets.
Yeah.
And apart from that, is there any other benefits attached to actually African countries ratifying it? Because you said so far it's only 24 countries, and I believe also they have not actually deposited what they need to show in terms of custom duties, what they have now put measures to be able to ensure that the free trade in Africa is realized?
Yeah, so just maybe to pick it from there, in 2019 we had around 22 countries for it to come into force, but at present we have at least 36 to 37 countries that have deposited their instruments of ratification in Ethiopia. So basically, the other issue that you talked about is what do we seek to achieve by virtue of this agreement? We are trying to build a market where we will be having ease in terms of flow of goods. Yeah, the agreement is structured in such a manner that first of all we have the agreement, or rather the protocol on trade in goods. We have the protocol on trade in services, and then we have the dispute settlement scheme. Those ones are part of phase 1. Now, those are the agreements that are currently in force. We have the agreement on trade in goods, trade in services, and the dispute settlement scheme. On the other phase, we'll be having agreements on investment, competition, and intellectual property. And maybe on the third phase, we'll be having an agreement on e-commerce. Now, I'm talking about the first phase. We are talking about trade in goods, in services, and the dispute settlement. So within this agreement, then we have various annexes to these protocols. So we have the Continental Free Trade Area as the main agreement, and then we have a protocol on trade in goods, a protocol on trade in services, and a protocol on dispute settlement. Now, within these protocols, we have further agreements that are called annexes. Yeah? So one of the annexes for trade in goods is the schedule of concessions, which you talked about. Some of the African countries have not shown how much they are going to liberalize, and that is maybe one of the key reasons why we've not started trading effectively so through this agreement. But the main benefits of this agreement, as I had stated, is basically liberalization of trade. You know, one of the real challenges in trade in Africa is the question of customs, you know. So we are trying to deal with customs, we are trying to ease the tariffs so that we have free pass for goods, you know, within Africa. Other than that, there is the other issue of non-tariff barriers. Now, these are barriers to trade that are not necessarily customs, yeah? Call it regulations on, you know, a good example is, for instance, call it way bridges, yeah? Or other regulations that seek to limit, the net effect is to limit the movement of goods, yeah? Delays in custom clearances for goods. Now, these are non-tariff barriers. So the agreement is trying to deal away with, first of all, customs, which is the tariffs, and then it is also trying to deal with non-tariff barriers so that we have ease of flow of goods in Africa. Now, the net effect of this is that, for instance, in Kenya, if we are having producers that are very competitive and effective, they'll be having a greater market for their goods. So that if I'm producing, let's say, I'm producing fruits in Kenya, or rather, let me say something that has value added into it. Let's say you're producing what do we say? Yeah, let's say you are doing some technology in terms of producing chargers for phones, you know. So if you're having a market in Kenya itself, you're having a market in Sudan, having a market in Chad, and we've reduced the cost of transportation, then this competitive producer will have profits and advantages by virtue of this agreement.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so maybe you could put it into context in Kenya, because you see, of course, there's been a discussion that Kenya is rich in terms of produce, and how will Kenya actually benefit from this African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement? Because I know, of course, people want to know if Kenya has ratified, what steps and what is in it for Kenya?
Yeah, so Kenya is a state party. It actually deposited its instrument of ratification. So it is a state party to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And as such, by virtue of that, Kenya is party to the free trade area. Now, being party to the free trade area therefore means that the benefits that come with a free trade area will trickle down to Kenya. Now, Kenya is an ICT hub, as you might know. We are doing well in terms of ICT, internet, and all that. So if we can then expand our markets from Kenya to the bordering countries, then these are ways in which we can build our economy. So on one hand, we are seeing that the Continental Free Trade Area will be a benefit to Kenya and all those other states that are largely competitive. You know that historically Kenya is one of the countries that are I will say, is an economic hub in the East African region. Yeah, and so when you look at even the EAC agreement, Kenya has been the greatest exporter to the partner states, call it Uganda and Tanzania. So if that was the case with the EAC, then if we put it in the African scale, then it means more market for the Kenyan producers. And as such, it calls for more profits, you know. So I think it is a step in the right direction for Kenyan producers. Now the only thing that we need to do is to add competencies, add capacity so that we can be competitive. Because we are opening up a market, we'll be having a production from South Africa, the likes of Nigeria, the likes of Egypt. These are economies that are bigger economies than Kenya, and maybe they have highly sophisticated production methods. And as such, it will be competition within Africa. Yeah. And so the ones who are producing with ease and with, call it proper goods, they'll have proper markets in the competition in Africa.
Yes,
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And also we were talking about, just before we started the discussion, about adding value to the goods that are produced in Africa, because we see the major challenge in Africa, we have the resources, but other people from wherever come and take our resources and actually add value to them. What could it, effect could this have on the manufacturing scene in Africa?
Yeah, so thank you. Africa is predominantly a raw material exporting economy. And so we are opening up Africa as a free trade area. And you'll realize that the problem is that we will be producing more or less the same goods. So it calls for sophistication, it calls for value addition for products. Yeah. Because if you want to export oranges, we are growing oranges in Kenya, we are having oranges in Uganda, having oranges in Chad, for instance, then we will not achieve the whole essence of having a free trade area if we have the same goods. So now it calls for value addition to our products. Yeah? If you are producing cocoa, or rather you're producing coffee, yeah, it is not enough to have the coffee berries. We need now to build capacity and infrastructure so that we can add value, yeah, and compete in Africa. Now the net effect of this is now having value addition to the products that are being produced in Africa, so that we not only have raw materials being exported within Africa and outside Africa. Let's have, for instance, goods that are we've added value, and now we will be building on our manufacture and not raw materials. So that is the whole essence. We're having competition in Africa. Now you need to up your game. If you don't up your game, you'll be beaten in the trade. So that is the whole essence, and that is the whole challenge that the Kenyan market and the Kenyan manufacturers should think of, trying to improve the value in our goods. Because the market is opening up. If you're not competitive, you'll be faced off. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for that elaborate discussion. And now we could move to the agreement itself. What are the key issues that are arising out of this continental trade agreement?
Yeah, so some of the issues that arise out of the Continental Trade Agreement is basically, of course, as a lawyer, I will go for dispute resolution. Yeah, because when countries have come together to trade, we'll be having disputes arising out of that. And that is an opportunity for lawyers, for instance, because though the dispute settlement scheme that has been adopted by this agreement mirrors the one of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. I personally have my feelings about that. I felt that having this dispute settlement scheme mirroring the one in the WTO was not really progressive, because as you might be aware, at present, we are having an impasse at the WTO because we need consensus to have members of the appellate body of the WTO to be appointed. Yeah. But the US has actually refused to coordinate, and as such, we are having the appellate body of the WTO is not working at present. Yeah. So we have a dispute settlement scheme that mirrors the one of the WTO. And maybe I thought that maybe we would have something that is more African, because this is
uniquely African.
Yeah. If we had better ways of dealing with dispute resolution, maybe trying to have sanctions. Of course, people say that sanctions do not necessarily make people to follow their obligations in international law. But maybe if you could have something more serious, realizing that African states are very slow at times in trying to meet their obligations.
Yeah.
So that is one of the issues. The other issue that you could talk about is there is an interesting provision on extension of trade concessions.
Okay.
Now, the agreement contemplates that it does not negate trade agreements between African states and other countries that are not in Africa.
Okay.
But it states that if, for instance, Kenya gets into an agreement with the UK and it provides certain trade concessions to the UK, yeah, these concessions that are provided to a third-party state must be unconditionally and immediately extended to states in Africa.
Yeah.
So that if you're providing benefits of trade to a third-party state which is not African, then you have to extend the same to Africa. The other issue is on agreement or decision-making. The agreement talks about consensus. Of course, most of us have reservations on that because achieving consensus
it's a difficult
is a difficult issue.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether there has ever been consensus in the first place, because at times you'll find that a state will just go into the purported consensus because it has nothing to really say about it. So how I wished that we could have one of the factors that they talk about, variable geometry, where we are having states that have agreed going forward to proceed with something, and then the other states that have not maybe agreed joining later, you know. So those are some of the issues that I see. Of course, there is a protocol on the trade in services, which is another great thing for Africa.
Yes.
As you might be aware that the sharing of services within Africa has been a great challenge in terms of trying to meet trade in services, because you might be a doctor in Kenya, but if you want to offer such services in Uganda, for instance, it might be very difficult. So we started with a pilot project of 5 services, some including the likes of transport and communication. So we are yet to monitor how these services will be liberalized, so that, for instance, we have free flow of transport from, let's say, Kenya to Uganda to Tanzania without any barriers.
Okay.
And then we will introduce other services going forward. Yeah. And then lastly, the other issue is an annex on the trade agreement with regard to the rules of origin. You know, when we have already opened our market, then we need to know which goods emanate from Africa, because there is a threat of, for instance, having goods from the UK, Kenya importing goods from the UK, and then maybe changing 1 or 2 aspects and trying to pass it through the free trade area. So the conclusion of the rules of origin agreement, or rather the protocol or the annex on the rules of origin, will be very important in trying to, first of all, trying to determine which goods should actually be granted the favors as a result of the free trade area, so that we don't have goods that are outside, being produced outside Africa, coming to benefit from the free trade area. So we need to have the rules of origin, so that we determine that these goods are clearly made in Kenya, made in Uganda, you know, made in Tanzania, so that they benefit from this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe also one of the key issues that I think you maybe should also talk about is the continental preferences in Article 18. What would be your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the issue of continental preferences, I think I talked about it, Article 18. It's basically, if you extend, that is what I was talking about, a third-party state. If you extend a favor, or rather Kenya has entered into an agreement with the UK, for instance, it has extended trade concessions in terms of reduction of tariff for some certain goods. If you do that with a third-party state, you have to extend that unconditionally and immediately to all other African states.
Okay.
So that there is no way we are having better trading agreements externally as compared to in Africa.
Yeah.
So we are having continental preference, so that we do not have a situation in which a state finds it easier to trade with an external member as compared to internal members within Africa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Jack.
Yeah.
And now, as we are almost winding up the discussion, what will be the take-homes for our viewers as regards to this African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement?
Yeah, so the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is here with us. And this is a step in the right direction.
Yes.
Now, I'll speak to the government of Kenya, of course. We need goodwill.
Yes.
Yeah, we need goodwill from the state and, of course, the other states. But specifically to the government of Kenya, we need goodwill in terms of trying to meet these concessions that are required, because Kenya is a party, and you know, by virtue of signing to the free trade area, it is a single undertaking. You undertake to be bound by the protocol on trade, protocol on in service, on trade in services, trade in goods. It is a single undertaking, you know. So how I wish that firstly, as a state, that we offer maximum cooperation in terms of implementing all these provisions in the Kenyan landscape.
Okay.
Now, to the manufacturers in Kenya and producers in Kenya, it is a time now we are having a greater market. It is a time to increase the quality of our goods and services so that they can compete favorably in Africa. Yeah. Now, to the legal practitioners.
Yes, like you and I.
To the legal practitioners, this is a good thing for us because we'll be having issues to do with trade remedies. If, for instance, there is unfair trade between Kenya and, let's say, Egypt, we might want to have a dispute being settled in the dispute settlement scheme of Africa, you know, that is created by the agreement. Now, it is time for Kenyan lawyers, for instance, to think about having knowledge on this issue. I know it is a very new issue, and that's why we are trying to speak about it. It is time for African and Kenyan lawyers, for instance, to think about the various aspects in terms of dispute resolution, call it in terms of arbitration, because the agreement contemplates arbitration as one of the ways of dispute settlement. It is time for African lawyers to fill up the spaces because the Secretariat has been established in Ghana. It needs experts in trade, experts in investment to fill up these positions. So it comes with a fair share of opportunities for lawyers, for economists, and for all those people who are having related trades with regard to the agreement. So it is a good agreement, but as I would say it, as I would tell my friends, it is upon Africa to deal with this agreement if they wish to spy it to the Vision 2063 that we have in Africa by the AU, where we are having a single market in Africa which has actually flourished, and we are having a self-sustaining Africa. It is upon Africa to take this agreement, implement it, so that we have the benefits that are contemplated in it. Okay. On the other side, if we do not implement it well, then it will be just a good agreement in paper, just as we've had many others that are not implemented.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and I've forgotten, there's a point to which I think maybe I don't know if we said it, when actually this agreement came into force. Because, you know, maybe our viewers might be wondering, okay, it was signed or ratified by some party states in 2019. Is it in force at the moment? And as much as it's new, how far has it gone? Yeah, so as you've stated, it came into force legally in 2019, May 2019, when the 22 instruments of ratification as provided for in Article 23, if I'm not wrong, Article 23 of the agreement, you know. But now the operationalization of the agreement in terms of trading actually started on the 1st of January 2021. Now, on the 1st of January 2021 is when we had the first steps in actually the rubber meeting the road, as we'll say it, as we'll call it, in actually having the trade itself being conducted under the African Continental Free Trade Area. So we are still at the initial stages. As I had stated, countries have not yet shown their schedule of commitments in terms of liberalization of tariffs. Not many countries have deposited their instruments to the Secretariat. And so it is something that we are still examining how it is working. There is, of course, some slow start in Africa, but we hope that as it goes by, then we can have even proper conversations on now the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area in the African states. So at present, we started on the 1st of January 2021. We are still monitoring how we will, now that was specific to trade in goods. Trade in services will start hopefully in July, if I'm not wrong, July of 2021. And then negotiations on the other phases are also on, so that hopefully in the next few years, then we will see the fully implemented African Continental Free Trade Area. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jack. And maybe the last question will be, how is this agreement related to the World Trade Organization?
Okay, so of course, the World Trade Organization is the single body that deals with world trade, and most of the African countries that have signed this agreement are also members to the World Trade Organization. So there is a concept called notification, where the World Trade Organization allows that you might form regional economic agreements or partnerships, yeah, so that we can have regional trade. So for instance, we have the EAC, which is a regional economic community, yeah, or a bloc. Mm-hmm. Now, for the EAC members, they have to notify the World Trade Organization that they are forming a regional bloc, mm-hmm, for trade.
Yes.
Now, the only reason that we are doing this is because regional trade arrangements are an exception to the WTO trade, because in the WTO trade we have a concept that is called the most favored nation, mm-hmm, concept, so that it means basically, for the layman, or rather, mm-hmm, anyone who wants to get that, it is just a big term, but it basically means, mm-hmm, that if you are trading in the WTO, mm-hmm, yeah, if you are offering trade concessions to country A, mm-hmm, you must immediately and unconditionally offer the same trade concessions to country B, mm-hmm, so that you should not have favors as between different states. You should not have discrimination as between different states. Mm-hmm. So when you come to a regional trade agreement like the one, mm-hmm, called the Free Trade Area in Africa, it is an exception to this, because we are offering better trade concessions to the, yeah, members of this, yeah, of this agreement, yeah, as compared to the other traders, yeah, or rather to the other players in trade. Mm-hmm. So African states then need to notify the WTO that they are coming up with something that will offer better trade arrangements for the members of the African Continental Free Trade Area as compared to the other, mm-hmm, members of the WTO. Okay. So there is a notification process that needs to be undertaken. Mm-hmm. So it is undertaken by each and every state. Like now Kenya will deposit instruments to the WTO, rather will deposit a notification to the WTO telling it that it has joined the African Continental Free Trade Area, mm-hmm, and as such, there are obligations that arise from that. Mm-hmm. It will offer favorable treatment to goods within the free trade area as compared to the others, which, yeah, is now an exception to the most favored nation rule or obligation. Okay. So that is the relation between the African Continental Free Trade Area, mm-hmm, which is formed, or rather which is formed within the auspices of WTO, mm-hmm, and the notification, mm-hmm, ought to be made to the WTO. Okay. So on to the way in which notification will be made, it is another whole argument, okay, of whether we should make notification under, mm-hmm, procedure A or procedure B, mm-hmm, which I will not delve in today. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Jack. And I'm sure the viewers have been enlightened, you know, mm-hmm, and I'm sure this is something, as you've said, it is developing. Yeah. And for sure, as you've said, all the stakeholders should take keen interest. Mm-hmm. So your most final words.
Most final words. I think, yeah, whatever I've stated so far is enough. But anyway, mm-hmm, it is a challenge, as I had stated, it is a challenge to Africa. Mm-hmm. It is a challenge to Kenya, mm-hmm, to rise up, because this is an agreement that has liberalized trade in Africa. Mm-hmm. Now, for the Kenyan traders that felt that the Kenyan market is so constipated, mm-hmm, it is now time to walk out of Kenya, mm-hmm, go to Algeria, mm-hmm, go to Mauritania. Mm-hmm. We are having a greater market. Yeah. Economies of scale are here with us. Mm-hmm. It is time to have proper produce of goods so that we can compete favorably in Africa. Mm-hmm. For the legal practitioners, it is time to delve into this agreement and try to look at it, mm-hmm, so that we can have benefits that result out of this. And of course, for the legal students, mm-hmm, I know you coach some students. Mm-hmm. It is time to read this, mm-hmm, because in the next few years, then it will be a big deal. Mm-hmm. So it is not safe for a lawyer, mm-hmm, to be practicing in the streets and does not know anything to do with the African, yeah, Continental Free Trade Area. So it is something that we need to look at, mm-hmm, and that is maybe the little of the much that I can say on this. It, yeah, is a discussion that we can actually hold for, mm-hmm, the rest of the day. Okay. But mm-hmm, I think we can end it at that, okay, if it's okay with you, yes, so that we might, mm-hmm, now look at the implementation stage. Yeah. And I believe we can converge and talk about the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area in Africa, mm-hmm, the successes and the failures, yeah, if any.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jack. It's been a pleasure having you. Thank you for the, okay, wealth of knowledge that you have spewed to the viewers. I'm sure they'll be looking forward to further discussions on this. And of course, as the viewers have heard, there is so much for everyone to benefit, especially the Kenyans. And I'm sure now Kenyans will stop copy-pasting or producing substandard goods. You know, that's one of the major issues we have in Kenya. Someone is always producing substandard goods, and I'm sure now it's a challenge. So it's time now for Kenya to focus on producing better goods. We know we've faced a challenge in Kenya as to the quality of goods being produced. So I'm sure the challenge is now on the manufacturing scene and the producing scene. And I know as Kenyans, we love challenges, right? We'll rise up to the challenge. So if you enjoy this video, share it widely, subscribe, and see you in the next one.